I noticed her before she noticed me, or maybe she did, and just didn't let it show. The air in the gallery was still, heavy with the scent of varnish and dust, the soft hum of the air conditioner the only sound between us. She stood near the far wall, adjusting the light over a painting that had more cracks than color, her fingers gliding along the frame with a kind of reverence that made me stop pretending to work. Her name was Clara. She'd been there only a week, brought in to restore the older pieces. Mid-40s, though I wouldn't have guessed it at first. There was something in the way she carried silence, deliberate, self-contained, that made people lower their voices when she entered a room. The first time she looked at me, I felt caught. Like she saw through the small talk, through the polite smiles. I looked away before she could notice my throat tighten. That morning, we were the only two in the studio. I was cataloging pieces, pretending to read labels. She was behind me, moving carefully, every step measured. When she reached for a cloth near my hand, her sleeve brushed my wrist, barely a touch, but it was enough. I froze. "Sorry," she said, soft, almost amused. Her voice had that kind of warmth that sneaks up on you, quiet, textured, like a secret being told too close to your ear. "It's fine," I managed too quickly. My hand stayed still longer than it should have. She noticed. Of course she did. For a moment neither of us moved. The air between us felt electric, though nothing had really happened. Just a sleeve, a glance, the smell of her perfume, faintly citrus, clean, but somehow intimate. She stepped back. "You're new here?" "2 months," I said. "You? Long enough to start seeing the flaws." She smiled a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. That line stayed with me, seeing the flaws. Maybe she meant the paintings. Maybe not. The day moved in slow motion after that. I found myself inventing reasons to walk past her workspace, carrying empty boxes, fetching brushes, checking the light. She never called me out, but every time, I caught her glancing up, not with surprise, but something quieter, like she was measuring the distance between us. By noon, the sunlight had shifted, turning everything gold. She took off her gloves, revealing pale wrists with faint paint stains. She turned a painting toward me. "Do you see the difference?" she asked. I nodded, though I wasn't looking at the canvas. She noticed again, her gaze lingering a little too long, like she was debating whether to pretend she hadn't. There was a silence that neither of us broke. The kind that fills a room so completely it starts to hum. My pulse matched it. Then, without warning, she stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel her presence, that slight warmth that comes from shared breath. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away. "You shouldn't look at people that way," she said, almost a whisper. I swallowed. "How am I looking?" She didn't answer. Just a small exhale, half a sigh, half a laugh. "Like you want to remember something that hasn't happened yet." Before I could respond, the door creaked open. Footsteps. Voices. She stepped back fast, as if the moment had been fragile glass and someone had just slammed it with a hammer. "Lunch break already?" someone called out. Clara smiled, polite, distant. But her hand, still holding the cloth, trembled slightly, and for the rest of the day, neither of us spoke of it. Still, I kept replaying it, again and again, the nearness, the almost, wondering if she was doing the same. The next week blurred into long hours and half-finished conversations. Clara spoke less than usual, keeping her attention buried in her work, gloved hands, careful brushstrokes, silence. But silence around her wasn't empty. It was magnetic. Sometimes I'd catch her humming under her breath, something low and nostalgic, like a memory disguised as a tune. I told myself to stop noticing. But I did notice. The way a loose strand of hair would fall across her cheek, and how she'd brush it back with the same grace she used to handle fragile art. The faint scent of turpentine mixed with her perfume. The small crease at the corner of her mouth when she concentrated. It was everything I shouldn't be noticing. One afternoon, rain tapped against the high windows, steady and soft. The others had gone for coffee, leaving us alone again. Clara stood near the drying racks, examining a restored canvas. I could tell she was tired, not just in her eyes, but in her posture. Shoulders drawn in, weight shifted slightly to one side, as if she was carrying something invisible. I found myself saying, "Do you ever get tired of fixing what's already broken?" Her hand froze midair. She turned, studying me as if she hadn't decided whether to answer. "Sometimes," she said finally. "But I've learned not everything wants to be restored. Some things just need to be left cracked." Her tone was calm, but something in her voice tugged at me, a weariness that didn't come from work. "Was that about the painting or?" She cut in, smiling faintly. "Don't read into everything, Eli." But I already had. Later, while she adjusted the lighting again, I offered to hold the ladder. It was an excuse. I knew she didn't need help, but it let me stand close enough to feel the heat of her body as she reached up, the hem of her blouse brushing my arm. She steadied herself, then glanced down. "You're too close," she said quietly. "I know." She didn't move. Neither did I. For a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world had gone still, the rain, the flickering lights, the hum of the air vents. Just her breath near my face, soft and quick, and the faint tremor of her hand when she reached to switch off the lamp. When she climbed down, she stayed close, maybe too close for it to be accidental. "People talk, you know," she murmured, not looking at me. "I don't care." She gave a short laugh, low and nervous. "You say that now." Her fingers brushed the sleeve of my shirt, lingering for just a second before she pulled away. That small touch burned more than it should have. I caught her wrist before she stepped back, not hard, just enough to stop her. She looked at me then, properly, the kind of look that searches for permission neither of us had the right to give. Something flickered in her eyes, conflict, fear, wanting. She gently slipped free, whispering, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I should have apologized. Instead, I said, "Maybe it was already hard before I got here." Her breath caught, a quiet, involuntary sound. She didn't reply. The clock ticked somewhere behind us. The rain had stopped. And when she finally left the room, she touched the doorframe as she passed, just lightly, as if to ground herself before walking away. But her hand trembled again. It started with a text. Clara's phone buzzed across the table as she leaned over a frame. She ignored it at first, but when it buzzed again, she exhaled and checked the screen. Her face didn't change much, but I caught the faint tightening of her jaw. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just my ex-husband," she said, almost too casually. "He still thinks every silence is an invitation." Her voice was even, but her fingers lingered on the phone before setting it face down. The air between us felt heavier after that. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't push. But something about that moment, the word ex, the quiet tension in her shoulders, made her seem even further away, even as I stood right beside her. Later that day, a delivery came in, a large canvas wrapped in brown paper, too heavy for her to lift alone. "I'll get it," I said, reaching for the edge. She moved to help anyway. Our hands met halfway on the frame. Her skin was cool from the air, but the touch was warm, too warm. She looked at me, startled, and neither of us let go. "Careful," she said softly, though her voice didn't sound like warning. I nodded, but my fingers stayed a second too long on hers before we both stepped back. The afternoon light dimmed early, a faint storm rolling in again. The others had left, meetings, errands, excuses, and the studio felt smaller than usual. Clara moved closer to examine the painting we'd unwrapped. I stood behind her, close enough to smell the faint trace of her perfume, something citrus and woodsy that always felt like memory. "Hold it steady?" she asked. I did, though the frame barely needed support. Her hand rose to adjust the top edge, brushing against mine. The contact was accidental, but neither of us moved. Seconds passed like whole minutes. "Eli," she said, low, uncertain. "Yeah. You need to stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" She didn't answer. Just exhaled. eyes flicking toward my mouth, then away again. I could feel her heartbeat in the small tremor that ran through her wrist. Or maybe it was mine. Clara! The sound of the door opening snapped us apart. Hey! A voice called out, one of the assistants. Did either of you see the email about the gallery inspection? Clara turned fast, voice smooth, controlled. Yes. I'll handle it. If he noticed anything, he didn't show it. He left as quickly as he came, the doors shutting behind him. We stood there in the echo of that interruption, both breathing a little too fast. Her hands were still resting against the frame. I reached up without thinking, just to steady it, but ended up steadying her instead. My fingers brushed the inside of her wrist, and she didn't move away. Someone could have seen, she whispered. I know. Her breath trembled against my neck. This can't. She didn't finish. Neither did I. We stayed like that, close enough for the air to pulse between us, too close to call it harmless. When she finally stepped back, her eyes met mine only for a heartbeat. Long enough to say everything we weren't supposed to. And nothing after that felt the same. By Friday, something between us had shifted. It wasn't in the way we spoke, it was in what we didn't. The pauses were longer. The air heavier. Every glance felt like it carried a question neither of us dared to ask. The others had left early for the weekend. The studio was dim, gold lights slanting through the blinds and narrow strips across the floor. I was packing up when Clara appeared by the door, still in her paint-smeared apron. You forgot this, she said, holding up my sketchbook. Thanks, I said, reaching for it, but she didn't let go right away. Her fingers lingered on the edge, her gaze drifting somewhere past me. You draw people, she murmured, flipping through a few pages. You see details others miss. Sometimes, I said. It's easier than saying what I mean. Her eyes lifted to mine, that long, quiet look that never felt safe. What do you mean, then? She asked softly. The question hit harder than it should have. I didn't answer, and the silence that followed grew sharp, electric. She closed the sketchbook. You shouldn't stay late, she said, but her voice trembled slightly. I don't mind, I said. Do you? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She turned away, setting the sketchbook down on the table. You're too young to understand what this looks like. I took a step closer. You think I care what it looks like? You should. Her tone was firm, but her breathing wasn't. Another step. You keep saying that, I said, but you never leave when you could. That made her look up. Her eyes caught mine, steady now, defiant. You don't know what you're asking for. Then tell me. She shook her head, but when I reached out, gently, to brush a loose strand of hair from her face, she didn't pull away. The back of my hand grazed her cheek. Her skin was warm, and she closed her eyes for half a second, just enough for the room to fall completely still. Eli. The way she said my name, half warning, half plea, made my pulse jump. Her hand came up, resting against my chest, not to push me back, but to feel the distance she was trying to keep. This is wrong, she whispered. Then why are you shaking? Her fingers curled slightly against my shirt. Because you don't know what I'll do if you don't move. I didn't move. She took a shallow breath, eyes flicking down to my mouth, then up again. There was fear there, but also something that made it impossible to step away. Say something, I said. I can't. The silence pressed in from every corner of the room, heavy, trembling. I leaned closer, just enough that her breath touched my neck. Her hands slid from my chest to my shoulder, gripping harder than before. For a moment, it felt inevitable, the closeness, the wanting, the years between us dissolving into nothing. Then, a sharp knock on the door. We froze. Clara? It was the curator's voice, muffled but close. You still here? Her hand dropped instantly. I stepped back, heartbeat pounding. Coming, she called, voice steady again, though her cheeks were flushed. When she turned back to me, she didn't say a word, just looked, once, long enough for everything unsaid to hang between us. Then she left, closing the door behind her. And I stood there in the half-dark, still feeling her hand against my chest, and the echo of the word almost burning in my throat. Monday came, but Clara avoided me. No quiet greetings, no shared glances over coffee, no small talk about the weather. She kept her door closed most of the day, and the few times I caught sight of her, she was surrounded by people. At first, I thought she was trying to make a point. That Friday night had been a mistake she didn't want to repeat. But there was something else in her distance, something more cautious than cold. It wasn't until late afternoon that I found out why. The curator, Margaret, stopped me in the hallway. "Eli," she said with a thin smile, "I heard there's tension between you and Clara." I froze. "Tension? She's a senior restorer. You're a temporary assistant. You can see how that might look, can't you?" Her tone wasn't cruel, but it carried warning. I nodded, muttering something about professionalism. But my pulse was already racing. Someone must have seen something. The late nights, the too long silences, maybe the way I looked at her. When I finally walked into the restoration room, Clara was there, alone, standing by the window. She didn't turn when I entered. "Did you tell her?" I asked. "No." Her voice was quiet, heavy. "But someone must have heard. Maybe that night." She still didn't look at me, and that stung more than the rumor itself. "Then what are we doing?" I said. Her shoulders tensed. "We stop before this becomes something it shouldn't." I took a slow step forward. "It already is something." Finally she turned, eyes tired, uncertain. "You don't understand what I could lose. And you think I don't?" She almost smiled, but it broke halfway through. "You'd recover. You're young. This would just be a story you tell later." I shook my head. "You think this feels like a story to me?" Something cracked then, a line neither of us could hold steady. She moved past me, close enough that her shoulder brushed my arm. The faintest touch, but it felt deliberate. Her breath hitched as she stopped, her back to me. "Clara, don't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please don't make me say what I'm trying not to." But it was too late for that. I reached out, fingers brushing her sleeve, hesitant, searching. She didn't move, just stood there, every muscle tense as if waiting for something inevitable. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter," I said. Her hands clenched at her sides. "You think I haven't tried to forget? Every night I tell myself it's just." She stopped. Exhaled. "It's not supposed to feel like this." Then she turned suddenly, her face close to mine, close enough that I could see the pulse in her throat, the faint sheen of tears she refused to let fall. "Eli," she said, barely a whisper. "I heard you talking to Margaret earlier." I blinked. "What?" "She asked if you'd said anything to me." "I was outside the door." "You thought I—" She shook her head. "I just needed to know if you'd protect me." "I would," I said. "I already am." Something in her face softened, relief, guilt, longing, all tangled. She reached up, almost touching my face, then stopped halfway, her fingers trembling in the air between us. "We shouldn't be doing this," she said again, but her voice was breaking. "Then tell me to stop." Her hand hovered there a moment longer, then fell to her side. "I can't." Outside, thunder rolled, low, distant, inevitable. Neither of us moved. The storm was coming, and neither of us wanted to leave before it broke. The storm hit that night. Thunder shook the windows, and rain poured down in thick sheets against the glass, muting the city outside. Everyone else had gone home early, but Clara stayed, and so did I. Neither of us said it out loud, but maybe we both knew this was where everything would either end or begin. When I found her in the back room, she was sitting at the long table, staring at a half-cleaned canvas. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. "You shouldn't still be here," she said without looking up. "Neither should you." Her mouth curved slightly. "Old habits. I stay until something feels finished. Maybe some things aren't meant to be finished." She finally looked at me. The soft gold light caught her face, tired, beautiful, afraid. I've been thinking, she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. About what you said. That this matters. It does, I said. She stood then, slow, deliberate. The chair scraped softly against the floor. It shouldn't. But it does, I repeated, stepping closer. Lightning flashed, flooding the room in white for a heartbeat. When it faded, we were inches apart. I could smell the rain on her skin, the faint trace of soap, the warmth of her breath. Her eyes flicked up to mine. If I let this happen, she whispered, I lose everything that still feels safe. Then maybe safety isn't what you need. She exhaled, trembling, her hand rising as if to stop me, but she didn't. Her fingers brushed my collar instead, light as air, the kind of touch that said more than words ever could. I hate that you're making me want this, she said. I swallowed. You don't hate it. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The storm filled the silence, a pulse outside that matched the one in my chest. Her hand slipped from my collar, resting against my chest instead, palm flat, her touch grounding and dangerous all at once. This is the line, she said, voice shaking. Then tell me where it ends. Her eyes searched mine, desperate, knowing. It ends when we admit it. The words hung there, trembling between us. I reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. She closed her eyes, just for a second, leaning, barely, into my hand. Say it, I whispered. She opened her eyes again, steady now. I don't want to stop thinking about you. That was it. The breaking point. The distance between us vanished, though we still hadn't kissed, it didn't matter. The closeness was enough to make breathing feel impossible. Her forehead rested against mine, her voice low, raw. I can't undo this, she said. Then don't. A tear slipped down her cheek, she didn't wipe it away. For the first time, she didn't step back. We stood there, hands barely touching, the storm raging just beyond the glass, and something in both of us gave way, not to recklessness, but to truth. She didn't need to say more. Neither did I. We understood it now, what we'd been circling around all this time. Not a mistake. Not a rescue. Just two people who had finally stopped pretending they weren't already lost. By morning, the storm had passed. The air smelled clean, rinsed, fragile, like something trying to begin again. When I got to the gallery, the city was still half asleep. Water dripped from the roof, collecting in small puddles along the walkway. Inside it was quiet, too quiet, until I saw her. Clara was already there, standing by the tall window, sunlight slipping across her face in thin, forgiving lines. She looked different, softer maybe, or just tired of running from herself. You came back, she said. Didn't you think I would? She smiled faintly, but it didn't hide the tension in her eyes. I wasn't sure. Sometimes people change their minds after the night gives them too much time to think. I didn't change mine. For a second, she looked like she wanted to believe that but didn't know how. I moved closer slowly, the way you'd approach something precious that might still vanish if you touched it too soon. Clara, I said, I don't want this to be something we keep apologizing for. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady now, searching. You think it's that simple? No, I said quietly. I think it's that real. She exhaled, a shaky breath that sounded like surrender. You make everything sound easier than it is. Maybe, I said. But you make everything feel worth it. That made her laugh, softly, the first real laugh in days. She shook her head, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. You're too young to say things like that. I grinned. And you're too smart to believe them. The space between us disappeared then, not in a rush, but in small, careful steps. Her hand found mine, fingers trembling as they threaded together. Her skin was warm, her pulse steady. For the first time, she didn't pull away. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you. Of how this changes everything. I tightened my grip slightly. Maybe it doesn't change anything. Maybe it just makes what's already there harder to ignore. She looked at me, really looked, and I could see it, the war between doubt and want, fear and hope. Then, quietly, she leaned her forehead against mine. I don't know where this goes, she said. Then let's just start with where we are. The room felt still again, but not tense this time. Just calm. Her fingers traced along my wrist, a small, grounding touch that said more than words could. No grand confessions, no promises. Just presence. When she finally stepped back, her eyes softened. We'll take it slow, she said. Carefully. Carefully, I echoed. I brushed my thumb across her hand before letting go. She didn't move far, only enough to stand beside me, both of us facing the same window, the same new light. Outside, the world was quiet again. Inside, it finally felt like we could breathe. And for the first time since I met her, I didn't feel like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't have. I was already there, with her. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?